I've noticed that some people will completely discount a game based on whether or not it's a first or third person game. So it got me wondering, what other features are met with the same irrational disdain? And well, I want to talk about it. Okay, so this is part 4 of my game feature series, and if you didn't catch the others, they are linked above and in the description. In this video, I wanted to talk about features that I think get a disproportionate amount of pushback when they're being discussed, especially in the extraction shooter space. They are Rezing, Monetization, and third person. But before we get started, what features trigger your curiosity the most? No matter what else is going on in the game, they have a specific feature or a set of features you'll give them at least a second look even if you don't end up playing the game. Comment your answer down below, and maybe even the name of the game for the example. So the first feature I'm going to touch on is Rezing. Now, downed mechanics and Rezing isn't new or rare, but in extraction games, it tends to get a consistent level of pushback. I mean, it's not surprising, since Escape from Tarkov has a huge influence on the extraction game space. There is a preponderance of players that hold on to the idea that all extracts must be like Tarkov in order to be considered as such. In this space, Rezing is seen as making the game more accessible, or as they call it, casual, and anything that remotely does that is seen as a negative. I suppose that's because when most people think of Rezing, they think of games like Apex Legends or Fortnite. Games that are nothing like the game they enjoy, and rightfully want to avoid having the game they enjoy no longer resemble itself. But not all games execute Rezing and down mechanics in the same way. What is Rezing at the end of the day? It's the ability for a teammate to prevent your complete elimination from the match. Well, that presumes some things. It presumes that you have a teammate, that they need to perform an action, and that you're currently in a stage that isn't at full effectiveness, but you're not completely removed from the match. There's a lot of room to tweak that. Here are just a couple of examples. Hunt Showdown has you lose portions of your total HP after being knocked down, and opponents are able to burn your body to increase this effect significantly more, along with preventing a res while the fire is still active. Gray Zone Warfare, it isn't released, but from what we know, is basically asking you to perform field surgery complete with blood transfusion, and even then, it's not available to someone who's taken a bullet to the head. And this presumes an additional factor of needing the required items to attempt the res to begin with. But why does this all matter? Well, games need growth, and one of the best ways of getting growth is having players that get their friends to try to play the game as well. That's made significantly easier to do, while also adding teamwork related elements with Rezing. Now imagine dropping in a game that you're still new in. A fight happens, and you're taken out quickly. With no Rezing, at best you're waiting until your teammates either get eliminated or extract. This could be worse by including gear that they have to extract with, completely killing the raid for the entire party. The majority of gamers play for about an hour a day, so this only needs to happen twice to kill the party's momentum for the entire night. If you're new and have friends trying to introduce you to a new game, how many more times does this need to happen before you just stop trying to play that game? Now, having the ability to res doesn't remove the possibility of this scenario, but just having the possibility of a res opens up this scenario to other outcomes. You would now have a reason to fight over your teammate's body instead of just instantly disengaging. This improves players' engagement even from the other team's perspective. It creates a minigame of sorts in that you have an objective that is time sensitive to fight for, and depending how you execute it, could tailor it to both fit with the game's theme as well as encourage cooperative behavior. It's one of those rare features that both improves the gaming experience for players and is good for the player base growth. Fortunately, based on the recent games I've been able to test, it seems to be a more common feature in upcoming extraction games. Moving on to the next feature, third person perspective. But first, if you've made it this far, there's a good chance I'm doing a good job entertaining you. You should consider subscribing. I appreciate your time, and now back to the video. Third person perspective is one of those features I feel gets an irrational response when mentioned. To illustrate this, and this question is mostly aimed at people who don't want to play third person, imagine, if you will, your perfect game. In your mind, it has literally everything you could ask for. It has all the features you want, all your friends play it, it looks great and runs smooth on your PC. It has all the things you could ask for, but it's third person. Are you seriously telling me you would let that prevent you from playing that game? Now, I understand there is no such game, but if your answer is that you wouldn't play that game, I would advise you do some self-evaluation, because that would be kind of crazy, I think. There are a couple of points I'd like to address on the subject though. I've gotten this comment once regarding third person perspective. Now, I'm not picking on this person, the reverse is actually true. It helped me dig deep a little to try to understand there is an emotional component to this position. Wanting it to be first person makes it feel more immersive, like you're the one in the game, not controlling a doll. But you still kind of are. All characters are virtual dolls, and the perspective is just an artistic choice. The controls are the exact same. I'd say that unless you're in VR, there is no difference on how you handle the character. I suppose it would be less abstract, but you hear the same and you move the same. Honestly, help me out here, because I can't wrap my mind around the idea of dismissing a game purely based on it being third-person perspective. The more common logical reasoning is that third person allows you to look around corners and above obstacles. And there are two readily available objections to this. Technically speaking, they don't need to. Multiple games have had enemies not show up unless the character has direct line of sight, so that's always an option. The other is that the door swings both ways. It's not like you can't also utilize this option, that other players can look around corners and you can't. It isn't exclusive to just other players, you know. While I don't particularly care which type of view the game chooses, third-person view has one massive upside for a game. Now, there aren't any shortages of successful third-person games across plenty of genres. You could easily list them. But I just want to highlight one. Now, before you zone out, just hear me out. When you're playing a third-person game, you can more readily observe and enjoy the skins you've purchased. And that's not something to be dismissed. Playing the Cycle Frontier as long as I did, I was no stranger to the shop. I could easily justify spending money on skins for guns and especially melee weapons. The more often I used a gun, the easier the purchase was to justify. But skins for my character, however, once I found my desired look, it was very rare that I could justify buying new skins for the character. It would have to be significantly more appealing. Like it or not, Fortnite is probably one of the most successful games of all time, and I'd be willing to bet its ability to monetize is directly linked to its ability to sell skins, which third person heavily influences. And that brings me neatly to the last hated topic, monetization. While there are, of course, countless examples of scummy monetization done by devs, I'm going to concentrate on something that is probably a lot more controllable: player perception. Because of how the gaming industry handled free-to-play in the past, players, in my opinion, are way too quick to call something pay-to-win. Anything that isn't purely cosmetic will be labeled as such. Well, for now, let's set aside the idea of premium games having microtransactions in them for a moment and focus on free-to-play titles, which in my opinion have a lot more leeway when it comes to monetization options. After all, you are playing their game for free. Could you imagine if in the Cycle Frontier, Jaeger had offered additional crafting stations that were only available with real-world currency, or even more stash space, or bigger safe pockets, or even imagine allowing players to purchase whole servers for the express purpose of playing only PvE with non-transferable gear or unlocks? The backlash would be predictable. The crafting, the stash, and the safe pockets would be labeled pay to win, but in my opinion, they aren't. And it would be a smart way to monetize something that people would gain value from that doesn't negatively affect other players, especially if they never allowed you to have more than what is earnable in-game. Aiming something like that towards new players looking for an extra level of security and breathing room in a game that is hard to learn would have done wonders for player retention. Now, I am sure there are those of you that disagree with me on these points, but for those of you that are a little more open-minded to these ideas, let me ask you, would you be open to them if the game were still around? Hindsight is 20/20 and all, but it's fine to say when you're fine with the game looking for ways to stay afloat when it's already rusting at the bottom of the ocean, but it's entirely different when the game is still alive. I suppose my overall sentiment is that when it comes to free-to-play titles, players are too quick to dismiss monetization attempts in any form outside of cosmetics, not realizing that it's not a charity. Yes, the game has to be good, first and foremost, but if it fails to make money, it will do nothing more than become a memory really fast. Just something to think about. If you've enjoyed this discussion, check out this playlist and consider subscribing to my channel. I appreciate your time, thank you so much for watching, and good hunting.